Welcome to all of you. I'm Harry Grammer, president of PGIAA, Pacifica Graduate Institute Alumni Association. And this is our newest endeavor, live from somewhere, where we will feature a bi monthly web broadcast highlighting various projects and offering a closer glimpse into the contributions of Pacifica alums around the world. Join us each episode, meet members of the PGIAA board and other guests, then step into the worlds where our PGIAA family is thriving. Live from somewhere is a brainchild of our alumni relations director, Diane Travis Teague, who strongly believes that alumni need a special place to gather, especially after this following year-long pandemic. This is a place where we have the opportunity to show off our genius of our community and share ideas, accomplishments, and possibilities emerging from Seoul. Today, we have with us the producers of Fates and Graces Mythologium Conference, and Stephanie Zachowski. Stephanie is a PhD, and she is a mythologist, a personal coach, and a marketing strategist in the airline industry. She co-founded the Fates and Graces Mythologium, a conference for mythologists, and they organize it every year. Stephanie holds a doctorate in mythological studies with an emphasis in depth psychology from Pacifica Graduate Institute and serves as treasurer on the executive board of the PGI Alumni Association. Her academic work focuses on internalized misogyny and the deconstruction of psychological and religio-cultural structures that influence social perceptions about women. She lives in North Texas, where she works with two people who are ready to let go of their people-pleasing personas. Wow. And become the heroine of their story. And also joined here today by Joanna Gardner. Joanna is a PhD and also a writer, a mythologist, and a magical realist. She serves as senior editor on the educational task force of the Joseph Campbell Foundation and as the thought leader with the think tank I Rewild. I hope I said that right. I Rewild, where she works on Eco Stories Initiative. On the Eco Stories Initiative, Joanna is a founder of the Fates and Graces Mythologium. This conference we're going to talk about today, she earned her doctorate degree at Pacifica Graduate Institute in Mythological Studies with an emphasis in depth psychology. Sounds like the two of you were in class together. Joanna's fiction, poetry, and nonfiction appear in a variety of venues available on her website at joannagardner.com. And that's JoannaGardner.com. So for the event this year, the theme is Myth and Healing. The program for this year's Mythologium is live. There will be 2.5 days of presentations from 50 mythologists on 18 different panels, 18, along with keynote speeches, or actually a keynote speech by Dr. Dennis Patrick Slattery. Panel topics range from mythic healers to healing tales of wonder, healing psyche and soma, and many, many more. Wow. So Mythologium sounds amazing. And for people who don't already know about it, how would you describe it? Any one of you can go. How would you describe this event?
Steph, you want to go first or do you want me to?
You go ahead, jump in.
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you so much, Harry. Thank you for having us on the podcast today. It's great to be here. Great to see you as always.
Yes.
And so if I were to describe the Mythologium, I mean, it's a conference, it's a conference for mythologists. That's what makes it unique. There are a lot of conferences out there. There's a lot of academic conferences out there. There's a lot of non-academic conferences out there. This is a conference dedicated to people who are interested in mythology. And we kind of open the doors wide to people who study mythology, people with advanced degrees, people who are interested in mythology, people who have just heard of Joseph Campbell. Everybody's welcome. The kinds of, like the program, which you did a great job describing just now, It's going to include panels like you might see at other conferences, and a panel typically has 3 speakers. And so each person gives a talk for 20 minutes, and then there is time for audience discussion. So we can really bring in the voices of the community at that point. And one thing that does make the Mythologium different is that we try to make it a soulful event. You, in your intro, you mentioned soul many times, as we do when we're talking about Pacifica things. And we really try to bring that to life in the Mythologium. We want people to have an experience that goes beyond just kind of, you know, the mental intellectual experience at many conferences. So we have writing exercises and poetry and kind of social opportunities, which, you know, on Zoom we managed to figure it out, but we're looking forward to when we can be in person again. And I'll pause there and see what Stephanie has to add.
Yeah. No, I think you rounded up. I just think it's a unique environment. It's a unique environment to gather mythologists together and talk in this way. I mean, I'm thinking about, like, when in preparation for this interview and like this talk, I was thinking about how hard it was to find mythology. I mean, to find Pacifica and find a space to do this kind of work. And I think having a dedicated space to come and chew on these ideas and process it together, and then have other mythologists come in with their ideas and they're processing it together. And then all of a sudden, these really rich conversations start to happen. And um, it makes for the magic that the Mythologium is, to draw in the mythology and the mythologists together, and just the space of, you know, joining, pulling together.
I mean, it just really sounds like a magical experience. You know, when I think of mythology, you know, I'm from Pacifica as well. So I have a different, now I have a different, you know, view of what and perspective what mythology is. But just thinking about it when I was young, and thinking about it when I was in high school and studying it, and just thinking about the dreamlike experience, right? That gets ignited when you think about some of the mythological stories of the past, and just that space of that liminal space, right? Of the in between, and where things aren't so clear. I think here in the US, you know, we really prize ourselves as a nation on just being clear, that, you know, clarity, and, you know, and everything needs to be cut and dry and black and white, you know, and we lose this amazing gift of imagination that we all carry with us, right? And the possibilities within, you know, the blurred lines, you know, the coloring outside of the lines, so to speak, and what can be created out of that. You know, and so when I think about, you know, this event, I feel like I'm in the room where imagination is just coming alive, and we're sparking these parts of our brain and within our soul that have memory of something, of some time, you know, in soul, right? Where we and somewhere we know really well, something very familiar that we can't always put our finger on, but we know that it's present. So it just sounds like it's just an enchanting experience of going in, and then it not just being all fairy tale, right? Like, there's some real to it, you know. There's truth in it. There's It's a place where archetype plays. So I'm really digging this, you know. I really am, in how you describe it. How now, Stephanie, you just said, you know, you were looking for mythology. You know, you found Pacifica, you know, as if you were, you know, on a quest to find the mythology program. So just share with us, and then you too, Joanna, if you can, just share with us a little bit about your background, and how did you come into this work?
Wow, that's a story, huh? Within itself.
And maybe how it ties together, maybe how, you know, how you know, your past, and you know, how it ties into you enrolling it into Pacifica, you know, and then earning a degree, and then moving on to making this your life's work, you know. Maybe you can share a little bit about
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
Yeah. I think if I were to look back, not that I could see it at the time, but I was always attracted to story and storytellers, um, and art and museums and the places, that ancient stories arise and get recreated and recrafted and reimagined. And that pull, just throughout life, just kept pulling, that I was drawn to story. And, I stumbled across Pacifica through the Opus Archives and Joseph Campbell, which I think is the pathway that many mythologists find Pacifica. And it just brought me into a world that I had imagined, but did not know existed. And it just opened things up. I like to say that, the world around me, all the images surrounding me started to dance. Things really came alive because you start to see with those mythological lenses that stories live in me, but stories live in the world, and those myths move us and influence us and sometimes drive us unconsciously in a lot of different ways. And I think that you mentioned my work and where it's going, and what I think when I look at the Mythologium, what I'm really fascinated by, we look for archetypes as ways to kind of find patterns around us for human experience. And what I found fascinating in my own work was looking at how I had understood myths to kind of arrive in one fashion, like this is the story and this is what it is and this is how it is. And when you start to study myths and the movement and the metamorphosis of those myths and how those stories evolve through time with cultures and social shifting and everything that goes into all that, the change became more fascinating, the movement, the molding of it. And I think particularly as we're looking at this past year and how we are collectively processing this year. And I think, as a mythologist, I see us processing through story, through imagery, through those things that are arising. And I think it's fascinating at the Mythologium to have a space to look at what's moving, what's changing, what's shifting, what needs to move, what needs to shift, how do perspectives change. And I think that space with the work of the Mythologium is where it lights me up, it excites me.
Thank you. Joanna?
Yeah, thank you, Stephanie. I loved hearing your account. I mean, Stephanie and I obviously know each other really well. We're really good friends in addition to working on the Mythologium together, but I loved hearing that version of her journey. And I mean, I feel like I was a little bit similar. I had been before I found Pacifica and the formal study of myth. I was focusing on writing, on fiction and magical realism and poetry, and not so much nonfiction then. Really more fiction and poetry. And I kind of reached a point where I felt like I had accessed my voice on some level, and I kind of knew how I liked to write stories that I liked to read, and they were kind of getting published in some venues, and that was great. But I reached a point where I was like, I really need to study more. I need to learn. I need teachers, and I kind of need some sort of credential to do whatever it is that is going to happen next. And I didn't know what any of that was, right? It was all just on the level of instinct. And I was like, well, but what kind of graduate work would I do? There's nothing I want to study. I don't want like an English degree, been there, done that. I don't want like business school, the only thing I would want to study would be mythology, and nobody lets you study mythology in graduate school. That was my literal thought process. And then I went, wait, is that true? And I Googled mythology graduate program. And of course, one and only one program pops up, and that's Pacifica. And so I was like, what's this? What's going on here? And so I danced around it for like a year and a half before I finally committed to the program. But, not only did I find the exact program I needed that combined rigorous academic study and room for creative work, but I found my people. Right. So I found the place where I could do the exact work that I wanted to do, even before I knew what it was. And I found the people that I could have the conversations with that I didn't know I'd been missing. And so, I mean, you know, we can wax rhapsodic about Pacifica for a long time, but in the course of our coursework, we started to go to conferences, and like we went to, I won't name names, but we went to a bunch of different conferences where mythologists could present, but there wasn't a conference that was just for mythology, right? We were always a little bit to the side. If the conference was about religious studies, we were like a little bit of a footnote. And if the conference was about psychology, we were like, okay, yeah, you guys can come in too. But there was no conference that just really focused on myth itself and the stories and the images and the psychology of the myth versus the myth of the psychology, right? And so I remember at one of these conferences, Stephanie and I were sitting next to each other, and we spent the whole time scribbling notes back and forth to each other about how we wanted a conference of our own, and we could do it. We knew we could do it, and that's kind of, I feel like that was a real genesis moment for the Mythologium. We wanted to make a space where we could continue having the conversations that we had in school, and I would say it's turned into more than that, you know. We had, like, I had this selfish desire, I want to keep talking to these people. And the conversations that wind up happening, you know, they're bigger than Stephanie and I.
Oh wow, that sounds amazing. Wow. I mean, both of you, just the way you came into this, it's like it's blossoming out of you, right? It's really beauty. And Joanna, your story is very similar to my story of how I found Pacifica too. In 2008, I was looking for a myth program in graduate studies, and I had been like steeping myself in Eastern mythology for quite some time, Hinduism and Buddhism, in the deep stories of their myths, and I was like, I got to go a little deeper. And Joseph Campbell's work was speaking to me, and then I found Pacifica, and I came to a day of the experience day where they talk about the program, and I came in, I got really excited, but I wasn't ready. This was 2008, and I wasn't ready. And I came back to register in 2011, and they introduced that year or the year before the community liberation in eco psychology specialization. And I'm like, what? And it was so hard to make the decision. I was already doing social justice work, and like, I really need this. And I asked, like, can I still get some of the mythology in this course? And they're like, oh yeah, absolutely. So I wasn't able to go all the way in with mythology. I love where I got my degree, but I want to dive back in some way. And I think you guys are a way for me to dive in a little deeper to what was calling me back then. So I'm really excited about this. What would you both say about this last year and the mythology, the myth of this COVID pandemic, and what's coming up from underneath? Are there any sort of recognizable themes that myths sometimes carry? Talk a little bit about that. What's happening in this world of myth with everything that's going on?
Who's gonna go first?
This makes me smile because Joanna and I have had this conversation a few times. So I'm
that's
smiling
awesome.
at this question. So I don't want to give too much away. I'm just gonna. My dissertation focused on the Christian apocalypse and the mythology around apocalypse. And Joanna, I'm not going to give it all, but hers was a lot about creativity and creation myth. And so I think I'm going to speak a little bit about apocalypse, but I think definitely for me, that was very visceral because I defended my dissertation in September, and we went into pandemic in March. So I've been writing and researching apocalypse for, I don't know, it felt like 20 years. I think, what do we spend? 3, but it feels like time pauses. Talk about a liminal space of dissertation. And then we go in and you're like, wait, whoa, this really feels like what I've been researching. Like, this is really settling. And I'd like to say, I kept an academic distance and this was so I could observe all of these patterns, but no, I freaked out, just like any other human being, in a very, very difficult year of loss. But what I will say, what arises in the archetype of apocalypse and the myth of apocalypse for me was a little bit about what you were touching on earlier, Harry, of the not knowing and the nothing, and what apocalypse destroys, and it tears down, and it's terrifying, and it is often seen as an ending, but there's also an aspect of inert potential in there, in the nothingness and the not knowing what's next. And so those were the patterns that I attempted to hold amidst the level of uncertainty that is, and we've all, experienced in different aspects of this year. So that would be the mythic pattern that I would bring to light. I don't know. What about you, Joanna?
Well, so it's a terrific question, and again, I love Steph's answer. So Stephanie's answer makes me want to jump right to creation, right? Because creation and apocalypse are in this sort of perpetual dance, right? The creation, the coming into being, the newness, the living out of whatever the mythic cycle is, and then the ending that comes with the apocalypse, and then creation again, right? And one thing I will say is that this past year has made me feel the emotional valence of these mythic themes much more deeply. You read about apocalypse and you're like, whoa, 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 that's amazing, whoa, whoa. And then, I think we've all felt different inflections of living through the emotion of apocalypse this year. And one thing I'll add also is that, our answers are one thing to that question, but the way that we're seeing the community of mythologists answer that question gives me chills. We put out, we kind of settled on our theme. I think it was late last year, late 2020. We were like, wow, we really need to be thinking about healing. So let's have myth and healing be our theme this year. So we put out the call for papers, and seeing what the community responds with to that call, it gives me a whole new it gives me so many more dimensions with which to think about the myth of this year, and the myth that everybody's been living through, the myths plural that everybody's been living through, and a feeling of commonality, a feeling of kinship that's in the air too. And I mean, I would just encourage you to take a look at the program for this year's conference to see what the community has come up with. So many specific, particular deep dives in so many different angles of this myth that we've all been living, and how it comes together, and it kind of quickens into this being that is, it feels to me, it's like the voice of the community. Yeah, I guess I'll stop there with that one.
I just want to add, I think that's a little bit of your creation myth right there in your description.
I love that. I some themes that you all just talked about now. The creation, the dance between the creation and nothing, right, and the apocalypse, and I'm just thinking about Hinduism, and I'm thinking about Shiva, right, and Shiva's dance, right, and how Shiva destroys, but this destroying is not a malicious destruction. It's a a rebirth. It's a creative destruction. It's a renewing and a rejuvenation, that comes out of that. So yeah, I really see that in the dance, the Shiva dance. You hear that all the time, and that dance between the creation and apocalypse that's happening underneath Shiva's feet. Yeah, you just see it play out in so many ways in mythology. And Joanna, you just brought up the program. I mean, tell me about the program. Tell me how each day is going to go. Give me some examples of some of the conversations that are going to take place. What's it going to be like at the Mythologium Fates and Graces this year?
Okay, I'll go with that one. And Stephanie, you're my backup. Tell me when I get it wrong, because I'm going off memory here. But yeah, so that's a terrific question. So what we're going to do is we're going to have some sessions all together as a group, and we're going to have some sessions with parallel panels, like parallel sessions, so that we have room for everybody. Because like you said, we have 50 presenters in 2.5 days. It's going to be all day Friday, all day Saturday, and half the day Sunday. And so what we're doing is we're having for the most part, it's morning sessions are together. We'll have like everybody in the same room for the same topic, and afternoon sessions are when we'll have our parallel panels, and we will record everything so that people who miss panel A because they have to be at panel B can catch up on panel A after the fact. But some of the topics that I'm replaying the program in my mind. We're going to have some special panels. We'll have a panel with guests from the Joseph Campbell Foundation. I think that one's called The Myth of the Body and the Body of Myth. And talking about, how themes of the body have appeared with, I haven't heard their presentation, obviously, but I believe, Campbell will come in on some level in that conversation. And what comes after that? Do you remember, Steph?
As far as we have the Myth Makers panel.
Oh, the Myth Makers panel. Yeah, that's going to be fun. So that one isn't about myth as much as it's celebrating a couple people who are making myth in the community. We have Raina Manuel Paris, who is a poet, who is a PGI grad. And we also have Jamie Figueroa, who's a novelist, we found her through a PGI grad, but we're bringing her into the community. And so they'll share a little bit of their work, and they'll do, a reading, and then talk about their creative process and how mythic themes come in. And then we'll split into some panels, and the panels are things like, there's a panel on fairy tales, healing tales of wonder, right? And there's a panel on science fiction and fantasy, mythic healing and science fiction and fantasy. There's one on mythic healers, figures who heal people in mythological stories. There's one, I think you mentioned in the intro, healing psyche and soma, which really brings somatics in and psychology. What else? I'm forgetting like 10 of them off the top of my head at the moment.
Oh, there's a lot. We have Celtic myths of healing, which is always fun to see when, the alignment hits on point like that. And then personal myths of rewilding. And then we have the two sponsored panels as well. Yeah. So PGIAA is sponsoring a panel. Yeah.
Talk a little bit about the panels they're sponsoring. We're sponsoring. So I believe one of the panels is confronting colonialism and the white supremacy myth, right?
Right.
Yeah, I'm just learning about it too, and this is really interesting because I've never really have thought about white supremacy and myth going in the same sentence unless it's somebody who's trying to deny that it exists. But other than that, as far as just like mythology and how that works, is there any information that you can share with us about how that conversation is structured or is going to flow, and maybe a little insight into I'm curious. What does it mean?
Well, let's share the titles of the three presentations. Steph, do you have them right there? We haven't heard the presentations yet. We know the abstracts and we know the titles, which you can find on the website if you go to myth2021.com. But yeah, so if we could, I think the titles of the three presentations on that panel will give you a sense of what that conversation will be like.
Hold on one second, I'm getting there.
Okay, I'll keep talking.
Wait a minute. Yes. So let me see if so
find it. You found it, Steph?
I did. So yes, so we have Dr. Rosalie Nell Book. I hope I'm saying that correctly. And her presentation is entitled, again, I'm hoping I'm doing this correctly, pronunciation, Held in Brujada, Reading Mesoamerican Myths of Femininity as a Radical Response to Contemporary Colonialism. C. Gabriel is presentations entitled Who's Your Daddy? The Norse, the Nazis, and the World Stage. And then Dr. Brandon Williams Craig will, his address is The Myth of Peace and Conflict Done Well.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, I think these are really important conversations to have right now. I can't think of a better time since I've been alive to have, these in-depth conversations about colonialism and about white supremacy and about, just overall, the story of domination and superiority. It's like I think this is great that it's coming into in as this way as well, coming into as stories of mythology and where we can on a deeper level, we're talking about depth psychology, where on a deeper level we can pull up these themes and see it anew, see it from a fresh perspective. And that's really exciting that that this is starting to get into important rooms like yours, to have these conversations. Yeah, that's really exciting to do that. And is there anything else you'd like to share about that entire weekend? I mean, where's it? It's going to be live, right? So it's going to be online, and folks will be able to, sort of switch between rooms if possible. Are they assigned to rooms? How is it set up on live? Live is always a you know it, you are you all like live Zoom experts? Because it's always really crazy when I'm trying to set up in advance like breakout rooms and pre-assigned and moving people over and the green room that you can do. How are you all managing all this and to get this done on that
Have
day?
help. We
Yeah.
can't do it
Okay.
alone.
All right. Maybe I can get a tutorial from you afterwards.
Yeah, last year, last year was the first time we attempted it, and we every time something had a glitch with Zoom, we said the trickster is here. The trickster's the thing, and trickster causes trouble, and we just say hello, trickster, and we work through it. But yeah, we have a small team helping us in the background with like so like let's say that you were going to present, Harry. Let's say you were at the conference and you were going to present. We would be in a Zoom webinar, and when it was time for your presentation, you would be turned from an attendee into a panelist. So your video would show up, and then you would give your presentation, and you would be there for your whole panel, and you would address customer. You would address the audience questions, and then when your panel was done, you would become an attendee again, and the our Zoom experts behind the scenes would turn you from a panelist into an attendee and turn the next panel into panelists and just kind of keep rolling like that.
Oh, that's great. Okay, so you guys have this down. It's going to be pretty amazing. And I know we're going to talk a little bit later about registration and everything and how people sign up and register and all that. But before then, I want to just ask, like, as far as aspiration, right? Like, in aspiration for this event, Fates and Graces, what do you see? Where do you see this going? Is this something that you all are planning to? Because, like you said, this is probably one of the only events out there in the world that just solely on myth, right? And so, do you see it, expanding, growing, crossing over the pond, and and finding its way? What are there aspirations right now? There may not be, but are there?
I want to hear Stephanie answer.
I think there's definitely I mean, people continue to gather and they want, I mean, there are places to discuss, I think, myth and their space, but this unique combination of depth psych and myth is a space that draws people in. And it's kind of like Joanna was saying earlier, I found my people. And I think when you find your people that speak that language and the language of myth and the language of story and how it looks at it in this very unique way that this environment is doing, people want to be here, people want to do it. So yes, I mean, I think like I think these conversations are really important for the world, and I think there's just importance to doing this research and this work and having these conversations. And so yes, I think definitely there is a future for this to keep going.
I think that's really well said. And at the same time, I don't know what that looks like. right? Like I think, Steph, I don't know if you do, um, well, who knows? We'll see. It definitely, it feels like I mentioned earlier, it feels like it's kind of different. It's bigger than just me and Stephanie at this point. Um, and that conversation, somehow that conversation needs to keep happening, that larger conversation.
Yeah, I totally believe that this larger conversation needs to keep going and keep bringing people together, continuing to gather. What are some of the things that people say after attending Mythologium? Like what's some of the feedback you get?
Well,
Goodness.
like it.
There,
um, we have a couple of quotes.
Oh, please share.
Um, so let's see. I did a poor job of doing my homework. I will confess. Um, let's see.
well, I think a lot, I guess what I would say to that is towards the end of the there is a and this is just unique, and this is the environment of having mythologists together, but there we gather, we're having these conversations, and there is a moment, and it's happened the past 2 years, there's a quickening, and it becomes its own entity, its own environment, its own emotion, right? And I think that is where we get a lot of meaningful response, like, wow, this was an experience. This weekend was an experience for me. And we've had that kind of put into words in different ways. Like one of my favorites was mythologically met and archetypally seen, which is something I know quite unique for our
I
community,
love
but
that.
it really captures
Yeah.
the uniqueness of that space. And so it's an experience. Um,
Mm. Archetypally seen. That's really deep. I love that, where we are seen for these more deeper seated expressions of our beingness, right? And folks are able to really experience us beyond just the superficial, or not the superficial, but yeah, like from our everyday and daily, but can really begin to view the world as sacred and coming from soul and heart. Wow, I love that. I love that. So the event, where do people find the information on the event? I know we have it posted on the pgiaa.org website. It's on our homepage. People can click the link and get led directly there, right? I believe that's so, right? Is there, and then Joanna, you mentioned Myth 2020. Tell us a little bit about where do people go to register?
Myth2021.com. So it's myth2021.com. And then there's a button on that page. That's the home page where you can find out.
Okay. Is there a deadline for registration? What's your deadline?
July 15th.
And I
Okay.
feel like we should say the dates of the Mythologium are July 30th through August 1st. So
Okay.
the end of this month.
Say it one more time, Stephanie.
July 30th through August 1st.
Okay. And what time does it start on the 30th?
9 a.m.
I'm just joking. I'm just
Well,
joking.
depends on where you are, right?
Exactly. Oh my gosh. Oh, so yeah, right. So I'm really excited about this experience. I'm gonna go ahead and register myself. I'm coming. I want to be there for this. It sounds really exciting. This is gonna be a lot of fun. Is there anything else that we should know about this event? Any more information that you want to share with the folks out there?
I have one thing I'd like to share, and that is it's kind of the credo of the Mythologium, which is it's really simple. It's we share ideas, we inspire each other, we amplify each other's work. And when you get a whole bunch of mythologists in a room and they all do those three things, that's when that quickening happens that Stephanie talks about. This openness to ideas, the flow of ideas, the celebration of ideas, and the sparking of new ideas. And that's what it's all about.
Oh, I love it. Oh my gosh, it's gonna be so special. I'm so happy and I'm so overjoyed that the two of you created something so special like this. You know, I've been at PGIA or PGI, you know, for over the years, and PGIAA, and I've heard about, you know, the raving reviews about Mythologium, and how special it is and what happens in the room. I'm looking forward to experiencing it. So I want to tell everybody out there right now that you got to go to pgiaa.org and go register for this event, July 30th through August 1st. And also Myth 2021 dot org or dot com. I'm sorry, dot com. Myth 2021.com. Register yourself. This is going to be an incredible event. We're going to have a lot of fun. So many amazing conversations. So many engaging, so much engaging dialogue is going to take place in the room, and you're going to find yourself in this enchanted world of beauty and depth. So I just want to thank the both of you for coming on to our second episode. You know, we're still in like experiment mode, you know, so, and just to have the bravery and the courage to step on this show with me today, I just want to say thank you. And I am just wishing both of you just the greatest of luck and health in 2021. Thank you so much for coming out.
Thank you, Harry.
Yeah,
Great to
thank
meet
you. Yes, it's wonderful.
All right. So everybody, till next time, thank you. This is Live from Somewhere. We will have another episode sometime in July. We don't have dates out yet, but you will be notified. Okay. All right. Thank you. Have a beautiful weekend, you two.
You too.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Thank you.